Hey everybody, welcome back to Fantasy Valley. I know I haven't uploaded too many videos of this series recently, and I'm sorry about that. I'll explain in a little bit why that is, but first I want to very quickly say what I'm gonna do in this video. I'm gonna make a couple of buildings with a bunch of scenery, which is kind of more of the same, but I'll want to add a bit more detail to it than the previous buildings. Yes, I actually do. And try some other variations of roofs and details and see how all of that works out. But first, before I start explaining things while we go along, I want to very quickly say that I'm sorry about the upload rate recently. I do hope to make it a bit better than one video a week or less, which it has been recently. It's just that school has been killing me and I haven't really found too many, good opportunities to record some episodes. Especially since some of these can take quite a long time to make. So basically I have this one weekend where I've been able to record 2 videos. That's good. We've pretty much got a good stash, I guess, for 1 week to keep going, but I do hope to make more videos. Hopefully 2 a week, but I don't want to keep it too strict to schedule, obviously, since making videos isn't my number one priority, or number one priority as a Russian hacker would say. But yeah, that's basically about that. Upload rate should be getting a little bit better, but don't expect anything really great because it's not summer vacation anymore. Anyway, into what I'm going to be building in this video. We have this one area right here, which sits right behind the coaster, and you can see the big plain of sand in the background, which is going to be the Arabian area. And basically what I want to do with this area is get a row of buildings in for 2 reasons. For one, because hopefully it should look pretty good and provide a nice backdrop for the rest of the area, kind of setting the scene and making sure that the Asian area is one nice, coherent, nicely themed area. And also because it kind of has the functional purpose of making a border between Arabia and the far east of Asia. And I'm not really sure how well that's going to work out. It's going to be a pretty... it's going to be a very small border, and the Arabian area, as you can see, is going to be very tight. It's not going to be as large as this area is, and I'm not really too sure how this border is going to work out, but what I do know is that I need one large building over here with the Asian facades on this side to set the scene here, and on the other side the Arabian facades to make sure that it fits into that theme. But as you might be able to see, there is also going to be a path which leads straight through that border into the Arabian area and make sure that both parts are connected. And this was kind of a challenge. I wasn't really too sure what to do with this because I need some kind of gate to make sure that you're still in Asia if you look from this part, but also to make sure that if you're in Arabia, you don't actually see the rest of Asia. You don't see big towers or a big gate in the middle of Arabia. And for that to actually happen, I had to get a gate into both areas which would look good from both angles, but also make sure that both other areas aren't too visible if you're standing in Arabia or Asia. And that is what I'm trying right here. And there's a bunch of different details to come along with it, because one of the biggest kind of criticisms that I had on myself was that there wasn't really a great deal of different details and different texturing in the Asian area so far. Much of it has just been using the very simple wooden textures, which is one problem. I wanted to get a bigger variety of different colors and textures in here just to make buildings look more interesting and make the details pop out a little bit more. But also I had the roof set which I made for all of the Asian buildings, and I'm still gonna use that set for pretty much all the buildings because I don't really have anything else in a game which doesn't have an Asian theme yet. But the problem with that was that many of these roofs do tend to look pretty much the same because they are all just clones, and after a while if you use them for every single building you lack the variation which you want to see in real buildings. And for that to actually happen, I am hoping to make a couple of different more unique slight alterations to the roofs for each of the buildings, and this is kind of my start to doing so, as you can see on the roofs that I've already got, which are more steep and have these different decorations on them. So I really won't be making new roofs from scratch for each of the buildings, but I will be adding different kinds of details to slightly change the shape or slightly change what kind of ornaments I have around the roofs. So that's what I want to play with a little bit more in the future. And another thing was the texturing. A way that I also wanted to do that is stop using just the same wooden posts every damn time and start using some different textures wherever it was possible. So for instance, for the bottom of this building, or for the different balconies, you have this very light wood, which I hadn't really used much before, but it's actually a pretty good texture and works quite well with different textures. I actually find, especially for wood, if you're using different kinds of textures within a building, it starts usually looking better and more interesting, which is why I wanted to go for this kind of combination here. Now the building itself, in terms of the way that it's built up, is actually inspired by some concept art, which I wouldn't really usually do, and also it's way too heavily inspired. I'll almost say that some pieces are just straight ripped out of it, which you'll see in a bit. But what's kind of special about that is that usually I was a little bit too uptight about doing unrealistic things, and mostly just used some real-life examples as references for knowing how certain roofs are made or how you can realistically place certain details and make certain buildings. But in this case I'm going for a fantasy park, and as some people very rightly point out, I should be less uptight about actually getting everything to be realistic and just have fun with all kinds of different ways of making buildings, and that is what I hope to do a bit more. So you'll see more of a mix between Japanese and Asian kind of buildings in this sense. But also the things that I'm basing on, I'm kind of throwing away all of the reference pictures of real life buildings and forgetting about what exactly has to be done in a certain way to make things realistic. And, you know, instead of doing that, just have fun with things and experiment a bit more and do some more weird stuff. But also, as a kind of change, I wanted to get some concept art as inspiration, just to kind of see in what ways you can do some ridiculous stuff with Asian elements. And there was this one art which was like, it was an arch, or not exactly, it was two bridges on both sides with an arch in the middle to make a really big gate into an area, and I felt that was something really good, but of course it was kind of already taken by that piece of concept art, so I wanted to make a gate and make something similar to it, and ended up making something really bad, even if it was unique, and scrapping that, and instead of doing that, just going straight for what the inspiration was doing, which was getting two bridges on both sides with an arch in the middle. So that's what we're going for here, with a bunch of different details that I was just kind of messing with, whatever would look good. But that's the basic makeup of this gate, which divides the two areas. We have the towers on the side, the bridge, which really makes it into an arch and something that goes over the path, but it doesn't actually connect on either side. Instead we have the big ornamental part in the middle of it, which connects the two bridges and makes the entire building finished. And this is basically the gate into the Arabian area. It still is a very Japanese building. It uses black roofs and it doesn't actually paint the wood, which is one of the biggest differences between Japanese and Chinese architecture, is that usually Japanese buildings don't actually paint the exterior, which Chinese buildings really like to do. So in this case it's a bit more Japanese, but still it has more kinds of details. It's a way less common kind of building, and especially in the placement which it is in right now, and what the entire row of buildings on this side of the coaster is going to look like, I wouldn't call it realistic in the end, but that's what we're going for, so I should just relax for once. Anyway, moving on to the second building, which is the much more Chinese inspired building, and a small experiment on trying out different kinds of roofs and windows and things, which is quite fun. It is a mostly red building with a lot of different details on it, but shape wise it's not actually too important or interesting. It's pretty much just a rectangle that is made interesting by all of the details around it. So I wanted to get two doors on the front, which are just kind of simple decorated doors, but hopefully with the color choices and the rest of the building kind of context will look Asian enough. and for the rest of the walls we'll be going with some different kinds of windows. And the thing that I was kind of testing out here is the many decorations that you have on walls and on windows on these kinds of buildings. There isn't any kind of Asian wall in the game, but what you do see on many of these Asian walls is so many paintings or frames or like decorative patterns on all of the walls, and there is no other way to really make this than to put a bunch of different details which are not meant to be used for this kind of thing together to somehow get some interesting patterns and colors into the walls. And that's what this building was mostly an experiment for, trying to see how you can put these different kinds of pieces together to make these patterns on the walls, and I'm quite happy with how it turned out, and also with the color palette of the building in a sense, since the building uses red details and red roofs, which I would usually kind of avoid. Usually the very quick and sure way to make the color scheme of a building work out is to have one color for the walls, one color for the details, and one for the roof. But for this building pretty much everything is red except for some of the things that cannot be red, or shouldn't probably be red, to at least tell what things are. But there's a lot of red on this building, but I'm still quite happy with how it worked out, and one of the reasons why I think it worked out in the end is because you've got all of these golden details that pop out of it, with the very vertical and not so Asian things on the front of it, but which work out to get some different colors and different kinds of shapes into the building and make that rectangular box still interesting to look while it still kind of fits into the rest of the facades. So there's that building, but we're already working on the next building for quite a while here. This final building is again very Japanese as opposed to the last very Chinese building, and it's really inspired by typical Japanese houses that you see quite a lot. We've got a large Japanese gable roof as the main section, and a smaller roof right next to it as a slightly smaller and way to bring out the building a little bit more. And that's really the very simple setup. There are many houses that have this kind of setup, but obviously since it's a really simple setup, I wanted to mess with the details of the building a little bit more. So again, adding a super large vertical accent, which no Asian building would realistically add, but it looks kind of alright, so I figured it would be pretty cool, especially fitting it in with the golden details on the building right next to it, and a bunch of different wood textures to make the different shapes. And also this is gonna be the toilet building. I have no idea why, but this also seemed like a very toilet building looking building, so I put some toilets in it to actually give this facade some kind of use as well. The other buildings don't really have a use since I didn't really find any way to connect them to the path. There's gonna be a staircase in front of the red building, and the two towers have like castle wall pieces on the bottom of them which kind of slope down, and there's no way to actually put any kind of facilities in them that guests would be able to reach, so this is really the best building to do this kind of thing in. And I don't have many toilets so far. And toilets are of course some of the most fun thing to build in this game, so going for some toilets here, and just to add a bunch of ridiculous unnecessary details that are still pretty fun to make, a small arch on the front with a decoration which right now doesn't actually have anything, but at some later point I realized that that was the perfect place to put the toilet sign, so we're gonna have a toilet sign in the future right there. And also I painted some of the planks on the walls, which you wouldn't really see in this kind of Japanese building either, but I kind of dig it. Gives some color into the otherwise just brown and black building, so I'm quite happy with how that turned out. And a bunch of doors actually to get some patterns and different colors into the walls as well. So it's shaping up pretty nicely. At this point I just needed to fill in all of the different roofs and the different all of the different windows and the different doors, and that is what I did a bunch of experimentation with here. I eventually just settled making most of these windows myself. The reason why I was, well, really hesitating to do this kind of thing is that it's very heavy on the pulleys, and this park is already quite a bit more heavy on the pulleys than I would like it to be. It is actually already dipping into 20 FPS, which is starting to worry me. I felt I was very safe before I went into the Asian area, but then it turned out that the roofs for the Asian area are as much of a problem as I expected them to be. I was definitely hoping to be able to finish the rest of the park, given by how much the main street removed FPS, but the Asian area in particular is probably gonna be by far the laggiest part of the park. But yeah, that's just a very quick side note. I'm not going to worry about that too much until it's actually gonna be a problem. But yeah, I wanted to stay away from like custom-made windows for that kind of reason, but in the end they just kind of look too good to avoid them. So I made a few windows for this building as well. And while I am super happy with how they look, it does kind of make me sad, because that's probably another frame gone for the rest of my life, and we'll have to see how to actually make this work in the end. Anyway, a last thing that I wanted to do, because the buildings are pretty much finished at this point, is add a bunch of pathwork stuff along the path here. The path itself is very narrow, but I wanted to make sure that this area is large enough to actually give you a good panorama of what this entire area is going to look like. But also, on the other side of this pond, I'm going to have a tea house, which is going to be a disguised chief beef burger place, which is kind of a shame, because these houses are like super posh and everything. But yeah, that's going to be a pretty important restaurant, and I'd like to have like some seating areas where you can actually sit down and eat your burgers as you look over the water, because this is probably one of the best views in the park, and I definitely want to make use of that view and put a restaurant in here. So we're gonna have a bunch of tables and like some terraces on this side of the pond, and I needed to open up the pathwork quite a bit to actually allow that, which is why we're having this very wide thing here. Anyway, you're gonna see that in the next episode, so thank you guys for watching this one, and hope to see you guys later.